feels like a lifetime ago, but it was only 11 months. Just this morning, my brother was arrested 2 states away, using a fake name, and my mother was in a motel lobby, crying to strangers about her heartless son. This didn't just happen. This was the fallout from a lifetime of being the family ATM. You see, for as long as I can remember, there's been this unspoken rule in my family. I'm the only one without kids, so I'm somehow responsible for bailing everyone else out. Car repairs, medical bills, emergencies that always seem to pop up right when I was finally doing well. I paid for them all. I told myself that's what family does. That's what I used to think. 3 months before this all blew up, my sister called me, sobbing. Mom, she said, had been diagnosed with a serious heart condition. Needed surgery immediately. The insurance wouldn't cover everything, a $15,000 gap. Dad had maxed out his credit cards, and my brother? Still recovering from his own financial disaster. They needed help fast. The calls started daily. Mom, voice weak and trembling, saying she understood if I couldn't help, but she was so scared. Dad, usually so proud, actually choking up, talking about postponing the surgery indefinitely. My sister sent photos. Mom hooked up to monitors, looking frail and terrified. The doctors, she said, warned that time was critical. I had been saving for a house down payment for 3 agonizing years. Every overtime shift, every skipped vacation, every night eating ramen instead of ordering takeout, it all went into that account. $18,000. My entire future sitting there waiting for me to finally buy my own place, stop renting forever. But what choice did I have? This was my mother's life. The next morning I transferred every penny. They were so grateful it almost made me cry. Mom sobbed, thanking me for saving her life. Dad hugged me, the first time in years, telling me how proud he was of his selfless son. My sister plastered Facebook with posts about her amazing brother. The whole extended family praised me. For once I felt like the family hero, not just the family ATM. 2 weeks later, despite being completely broke, I felt good. I was back to square one financially, but I'd saved my mom. I was eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner, couldn't go out with friends, but it was worth it. Then my cousin Jake called, excited about something he'd seen on social media. Photos from my brother's Instagram story. The whole family, mom, dad, my sister, my brother, all their kids, on a massive cruise ship. Tropical drinks, formal dinners, private islands. The photos were dated from just 2 days prior. Jake was confused. Wasn't Aunt Karen recovering from major heart surgery? My stomach dropped. I hung up and immediately pulled up my brother's Instagram. There they were. Dozens of photos, videos, a week-long expensive cruise. Mom looked healthier than I'd seen her in years, dancing on deck, posing with cocktails. The entire family, living it up on a several $1,000 vacation. I drove straight to my parents' house, screenshots ready on my phone. Mom answered. That perfect smile, that guilty expression. It told me everything. When I showed her the photos, she didn't even try to deny it. She just sighed, said they figured I'd find out eventually, but hoped it would be after they got back. There was no heart condition, no surgery, no medical emergency. Mom had a routine checkup 3 months ago, and they'd used her normal paperwork to create fake medical bills with Dad's printer and some creative photo editing. They'd been planning this family reunion cruise for over 6 months. A luxury trip I was deliberately excluded from because, well, someone had to fund it. My sister tried to justify it. We deserved a vacation after working so hard. Dad chimed in. You make more money than any of us, it's not like you'd really miss $18,000. And Mom? She actually had the nerve to say, we knew you'd want us to enjoy ourselves instead of worrying about money. You should be happy your gift brought the family together. But here's the part that absolutely destroyed me. My brother, maybe feeling guilty, maybe just hammered on post-vacation confidence, pulled out his phone. He showed me a group chat from 6 months ago. The whole family, planning this elaborate scheme. They were joking about how gullible I was, making bets on how fast I'd hand over the money when they played the dying mother card. Laughing about how I always fell for their sob stories. I stared at those messages for a long time. Messages calling me such a sucker, saying it was always so easy to get money out of him. They'd even joked about what other fake emergencies they could create in the future. My own family had turned scamming me into a group activity. I walked out of that house without saying another word. But I wasn't done. Not even close. They had no idea what they'd unleashed. Being the family's personal ATM for years had taught me a lot about their finances. And I had access to information they definitely didn't want getting out. What I did next didn't just get my money back. Completely destroyed their lives. I knew exactly where to start. My sister had bragged for years about her successful online boutique. I'd helped her with the books when she first started, and she'd never changed her passwords. I still had access. What I found was exactly what I expected. Years of unreported income, cash transactions hidden from the IRS, personal expenses written off as business costs. My brother's situation was even more interesting. He had a side business fixing cars, all cash deals, never reported. I had photos from family gatherings showing dozens of cars in various stages of repair, plus text messages where he'd asked me to help move money around to avoid complications. He'd also been collecting unemployment while working this gig. The state would definitely want to know about that. But my parents, they had the most to lose. Dad had been doing under-the-table contracting work for years. Mom sold homemade crafts online that were actually cheap imports she relabeled. They'd been hiding money in multiple accounts, some under fake names. And I knew about all of them because they'd used me as a reference when opening them. I spent the next week gathering everything. Screenshots, bank statements, photos, text messages. Years of evidence, painting a very clear picture of a family that had been scamming more than just me. They'd been cheating the system for years, crying poverty only when they needed something from me. My first move was subtle. I created anonymous email accounts and started sending my sister's biggest clients proof that she was reselling cheap knockoffs as handmade originals. Within days, her reviews tanked. Refund requests poured in. She called me, crying, about how someone was trying to destroy her business, never suspecting it was me. Sitting across from her at Mom's kitchen table, offering sympathy while forwarding more evidence to angry customers. My brother's comeuppance came next. An anonymous tip to the unemployment office, including photos of him working on cars with timestamps proving he was claiming benefits while earning cash. The investigation started immediately. Suddenly, he was facing not just repayment of benefits but potential fraud charges. He was at my apartment within hours, begging me for money for a lawyer. I told him I was broke because I'd given everything to Mom's surgery. The look on his face when he realized the irony? Priceless. My parents required a more delicate touch. I couldn't go after them directly without revealing my involvement. So I got creative. I started leaving subtle hints around their social circle about their financial situation. A comment about Dad's new truck here. A question about Mom's expensive jewelry there. Soon, their friends were asking uncomfortable questions about how they could afford such nice things if they needed their son to pay for emergency surgery. The real blow came when I anonymously sent their church evidence of the cruise photos, dated during Mom's supposed recovery. The same church where they'd asked for prayers and donations for her life-saving surgery. The congregation had even held fundraisers and bake sales. Suddenly, they were persona non grata at the place they'd attended for 20 years. But I wasn't satisfied with just social consequences. I wanted my money back. That's when I remembered the family reunion planned for next month at my aunt's lake house. Every year, the whole extended family gathered for a weekend of barbecues and bonding. This year would be different. I had plans that would make their cruise look like a bargain vacation. I started by calling my aunt, expressing concern about Mom's recovery, and suggesting we make this reunion extra special for her. My aunt, who hadn't been told about the fake surgery, was confused but eager to help. I convinced her to let me handle the planning, and more importantly, the deposits for the rental properties and catering. Then I called each family member individually. I told my sister the reunion was canceled due to drama between other relatives. My brother? Postponed indefinitely. My parents? A fake date 2 weeks after the actual event. Each person got a different story, and I made sure to ask them to keep it quiet to avoid family drama. The real reunion went ahead as planned. Every cousin, aunt, uncle, and distant relative showed up, except for my immediate family. The story started coming out quickly. My cousin Jake mentioned the cruise photos to my aunt. Another relative asked about Mom's surgery, and was shocked to learn it was fake. By the end of the weekend, the entire extended family knew about the scam. My parents found out when they showed up 2 weeks later to an empty lake house and a bill for the rental they'd supposedly prepaid. The owner informed them that their son had canceled their reservation and received a full refund. Same thing with the catering, the boat rentals, every expense they thought they'd covered. My sister discovered the truth when customers started asking why she'd missed the craft fair she'd paid to vend at. Another event I'd helpfully canceled on her behalf, pocketing the refund. My brother's revelation came when the classic car he'd bought at auction turned out to be a lemon, because I'd outbid him on the actual car he wanted and bought a lookalike rust bucket to swap in its place. Each discovery led to frantic family group texts that I watched with satisfaction. They were turning on each other, accusing one another of sabotage, not realizing it was me pulling every string. Mom blamed Dad for not being careful with the cruise photos. Dad blamed my brother for posting them. My brother blamed my sister for running her mouth. My sister accused Mom of being too greedy. The implosion was beautiful to watch. But I still didn't have my money back. That's when Mom made her biggest mistake. In desperation, she tried the same trick again. This time, claiming Dad needed emergency gallbladder surgery. She even sent fake medical bills to the extended family, hoping to recoup some of their losses. But everyone knew their game now. Not only did no one contribute, but my aunt forwarded the emails to me with a note. "Can you believe they're trying this again?" I had everything I needed. I compiled all the evidence. The fake medical bills, the cruise photos, the planning group chat messages, the proof of their various tax frauds and scams. I put it all in a neat folder and invited them over for dinner. They arrived expecting another confrontation, or maybe an opportunity to guilt me into helping with their mounting financial problems. Instead, I calmly laid out everything I'd done. Every canceled reservation, every exposed lie, every anonymous tip. I showed them how I'd systematically dismantled their lives, just like they'd systematically stolen from me. The silence was deafening. Mom started crying, real tears this time. Dad's face went from red to white to green. My siblings looked like they'd been punched in the gut. But I wasn't done. I pulled out my laptop and showed them a draft email address to the IRS, the state unemployment office, and every other relevant authority. It contained everything. Years of evidence that would result in audits, investigations, and potentially criminal charges. "Here's the deal," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "You have 48 hours to return every penny of my $18,000. I don't care if you have to sell your cars, take out loans, or actually get jobs. You figure it out. Every penny, or this email gets sent." My brother tried to argue they'd spent it all on the cruise. I pulled up screenshots of their social media, showing new purchases made after the trip. Dad's motorcycle, Mom's kitchen renovation, my sister's new inventory. They had assets. They just didn't want to give them up. "But we're family," Mom whispered, trying one last manipulation. "Family doesn't steal from each other," I replied. "Family doesn't plan elaborate cons and laugh about it in group chats. Family doesn't exclude someone from vacations funded with their life savings." The 48 hours that followed were intense. They tried everything. Guilt, anger, threats to cut me off, even attempting to hack into my accounts to delete the evidence. My sister posted vague messages on social media about toxic people and family betrayal. My brother showed up at my work trying to embarrass me. Mom sent her flying monkeys. Various relatives she'd convinced I was being unreasonable. But I held firm. I had backups of everything in multiple locations. I'd already told Jake and a few other trusted cousins the full story, so their attempts to paint me as the villain fell flat. The clock kept ticking. With 6 hours left on my deadline, they broke. The money started coming in. A wire transfer from my parents for $8,000. A cashier's check from my sister for $5,000. And finally, with just 30 minutes to spare, my brother showed up with $5,000 in cash he'd gotten from selling his prized motorcycle. I counted every dollar in front of them. When I confirmed it was all there, I pulled up the draft email and deleted it, but I made sure they saw me save copies of everything to multiple drives first. "This doesn't make us even," I said as they prepared to leave. "This just means you won't go to jail. We're done as a family. Don't contact me for emergencies, real or fake. Don't invite me to holidays. Don't ask for favors. You killed whatever relationship we had when you decided I was nothing more than a wallet to raid." Dad tried to salvage some dignity. You destroyed our lives over money. How does that make you any better than us? I looked him straight in the eye. I didn't destroy your lives. I just made you face the consequences of your choices. Every bit of fallout you're dealing with is from your actions. I just stopped protecting you from them." They left without another word. In the weeks that followed, I heard through the grapevine about their struggles. My sister's boutique failed completely. My brother had to sell most of his tools to pay back the unemployment office. My parents were audited and had to pay substantial penalties. The extended family kept them at arm's length, no longer trusting anything they said. Meanwhile, I put my $18,000 back into my house fund and added to it over the following months. 6 months later, I finally bought my own place. A small but perfect starter home where no family member has ever been invited. My credit score recovered, my stress levels dropped, and I learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes the best family is the one you choose, not the one you're born into. The last I heard, they were still blaming each other. Mom insisted it was Dad's idea. Dad claimed my siblings pushed for it. My brother said my sister was too greedy. My sister accused my brother of being careless with the photos. None of them ever acknowledged the real problem. Their decision to steal from someone who'd only ever tried to help them. But that's not my problem anymore. They made their choices and I made mine. And for the first time in my adult life, I'm free from the burden of being the family ATM. My bank account and my peace of mind have never been better. The weeks following their departure brought an unexpected calm. I changed my locks, blocked their numbers, and finally started sleeping through the night without worrying about the next fabricated crisis. My coworkers noticed the difference. I was showing up energized instead of exhausted from late-night emergency calls. My friend Kathy, who'd watched this family drama unfold for years, took me out to celebrate my newfound freedom. That peaceful period lasted exactly 17 days. The first sign of trouble came through my work email. My boss forwarded me a message from someone claiming to be a concerned family friend, wanting to warn the company about my unstable behavior and vindictive tendencies. It was anonymous, but I recognized Mom's writing style immediately. The same dramatic flair she'd used in those fake medical documents. She always used too many adjectives when trying to sound official. I showed the email to my boss, briefly explaining the situation. He'd known me for 5 years and wasn't buying their story, but it still made me nervous. If they were willing to go after my job, what else were they planning? The answer came 3 days later. My landlord called. Someone had reported I was running an illegal business out of my apartment, claiming I had criminal associates coming and going at all hours. The complaint was anonymous, but the landlord mentioned the caller had sounded like an older man with a slight southern draw. Dad's signature accent when he was trying to sound authoritative. I had to let the landlord inspect my apartment. He found nothing but my normal living space and home office, dismissing the complaint with an apologetic expression. But now I had 2 strikes against me in places that mattered, my work and my home. My sister's attack came through social media. She created fake profiles and started commenting on every professional post I'd made, leaving subtle hints about my questionable ethics and family abandonment issues. She was careful not to say anything traceable, but the damage was starting to add up. A potential client I'd been courting for months suddenly ghosted me after one of these comments appeared on my LinkedIn. Most people who knew me well didn't believe her, but some casual friends started distancing themselves, unsure what to believe. Kathy stood by me, as did Benjamin and a few others who'd seen how my family treated me over the years. But watching my social circle shrink because of their lies stung more than I expected. I'd already lost my family. Now they were trying to take my friends too. My brother took a different approach. He started showing up at places he knew I frequented. My gym, my favorite coffee shop, the grocery store near my apartment. He never approached me directly, just lurked, phone out, obviously recording. When I confronted him once outside the gym, he claimed it was a public space and he had every right to be there. The gym manager, who knew us both, asked him to leave, but the harassment continued elsewhere. I started documenting everything, taking screenshots, keeping a detailed log. My friend Benjamin, who worked in IT security, helped me trace some of the fake social media accounts back to IP addresses I recognized, linking them to my family members' devices. But nothing that would hold up legally. The escalation came when I received a package at work with no return address. Inside was a printed photo of me at the coffee shop. taken during my brother's stalking sessions. "We know where you go," was written across it in red marker. My hands shook. This wasn't just about money anymore. They were trying to intimidate me into what? Giving them more money? Letting them back into my life? I took the package to the police, but they said without a direct threat of violence, there wasn't much they could do. The officer suggested a restraining order but warned that family cases were complicated and often dismissed unless there was documented physical violence. That night, I installed security cameras around my apartment and changed my daily routines. I started working from home more, varied my gym times, avoided predictable patterns. It felt like I was living in a spy movie, except the villains were the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The next phase of their campaign hit me where it really hurt: my friends. My sister reached out to mutual acquaintances with a sob story about how I'd destroyed the family and stolen their life savings through manipulation. She even claimed I'd hacked their accounts and fabricated evidence against them. Most people who knew me well didn't believe her, but some casual friends started distancing themselves. The financial attacks resumed when I discovered someone had applied for credit cards in my name. 3 different applications, all rejected thanks to the fraud alerts I'd wisely placed on my credit reports months earlier. The applications used my social security number and personal information that only family members would know. When I called the credit card companies, they confirmed the applications had been submitted from computers in my hometown. I spent hours on the phone filing fraud reports, adding extra security measures. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd stolen my actual money, and now they were trying to steal my financial identity. I started with research. Every public record, every social media post, every financial trail they'd left over the years. Benjamin helped me use legal tools to gather information. Nothing illegal, just thorough. We found patterns I hadn't noticed before. Dad had a gambling problem, hidden well with regular cash withdrawals matching poker games at a nearby casino. Mom had been selling items on online marketplaces that looked suspiciously like things that had gone missing from relatives' houses over the years. My sister had a history of starting and abandoning online businesses, leaving a trail of unhappy customers and unpaid debts. Armed with this information, I crafted a careful strategy. I wouldn't sink to their level with harassment or lies. Instead, I'd use truth as my weapon. I created a simple website. Nothing fancy, just a clean layout with a timeline of events. I posted the screenshots from their group chat planning the fake surgery, the cruise photos with timestamps, the fake medical bills. I included a section called Patterns of Deception that documented, with evidence, their history of financial manipulation going back years. Everything was factual, documented, and presented without emotion or editorializing. I didn't share the website publicly or promote it on social media. Instead, I sent the link privately to every extended family member who'd been contacted by my parents for money. I sent it to the church they'd scammed. I sent it to my brother's client base through a carefully worded email that simply said, "You may want to know who you're doing business with." The effect was immediate. My Aunt Catherine called me within hours, horrified. She'd been considering lending them money for what they claimed was a mortgage payment, but now understood it was likely for gambling debts or credit card bills. Other relatives shared similar stories. Each had been approached with different emergencies, all urgently needing thousands. My brother's remaining clients started canceling appointments. One sent him a message saying they couldn't trust someone who'd participated in defrauding his own brother. My sister received notices from several online marketplaces that her selling accounts had been suspended due to customer complaints that had been filed after people saw the website and connected her to previous scams. The church formally banned my parents from the premises and demanded repayment of the donations they'd received under false pretenses. The pastor sent a letter CC'd to me, expressing deep disappointment in their deception and manipulation of the congregation's goodwill. But I wasn't prepared for their next move. If they couldn't attack me directly or through my relationships, they'd go after my future. I'd been in the process of closing on my house when suddenly the mortgage company called with concerns. They'd received an anonymous tip. I'd lied on my application. My down payment was obtained through illegal means. I had hidden debts. None of it was true, but it triggered a review that delayed my closing by 3 weeks, while I provided documentation to refute each claim. The stress of potentially losing my dream home after everything else was almost too much. I spent sleepless nights gathering bank statements, tax returns, and employment records. My real estate agent warned me the seller was getting nervous. That's when Jake provided crucial help. He'd been recording conversations with my parents where they bragged about sabotaging my mortgage application. They didn't know he was documenting their admissions, thinking he was sympathetic to their cause. He sent me the audio files, which I immediately forwarded to my lawyer. The mortgage company, faced with evidence of deliberate interference, expedited my application. The closing went through, but the experience had shaken me. They were willing to destroy my future to punish me for demanding my money back. Moving day arrived with a mix of relief and anxiety. I hired professional movers and didn't tell anyone except Kathy and Benjamin the exact date. I'd learned to be paranoid about sharing any personal information that could be used against me. As I watched my belongings being loaded, I felt like I was escaping a war zone. My new home was in a different part of the city, far from my family's usual haunts. It had a security system, cameras, and most importantly, an address they didn't know. I'd even used an LLC to purchase it, adding an extra layer of privacy. The first night in my new home should have been celebratory. Instead, I found myself checking security cameras and double-checking locks. The psychological toll of months of harassment had left me jumpy and paranoid. Every car that slowed down outside made my heart race. Every unknown number calling my phone sent my anxiety spiking. But I wasn't the only one suffering. Jake reported that my family situation had deteriorated rapidly. Without their various income streams and with their reputations destroyed, they were facing genuine financial hardship, the kind they'd only pretended to have before. Dad had been forced to take a legitimate job at a hardware store, his first regular employment in years. The humiliation of working retail at his age after years of bragging about being his own boss was eating at him. Mom had applied for work at various craft stores, but her reputation for selling fake handmade items preceded her. My sister was working at a call center, a far cry from her dreams of being a successful boutique owner. My brother had sold his truck and was taking the bus to what remained of his client base. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy. Then I remembered the group chat messages, the months of harassment, the attempts to destroy my career and relationships. They'd created this situation entirely on their own. The final straw in their campaign came through the mail. A thick envelope, no return address, contained printed screenshots of every personal photo I'd ever shared on social media, going back years. Pictures with friends, vacation photos, professional headshots, all printed out with disturbing messages written on them. We're watching. You can't hide forever. Family is forever. This time the police took it seriously. The messages constituted a clear threat, and combined with my documentation of previous incidents, I finally had enough for a restraining order. The process was draining. Court appearances, testimony, reliving the entire saga for a judge. But when the orders were granted against all four of them, I felt a weight lift. They were legally required to stay away from me, my home, and my workplace. Any contact would result in arrest. It wasn't perfect protection, but it was something. The restraining order seemed to finally break through their delusion that they could harass me into submission. The reality of potential jail time made them reconsider. The messages stopped. The fake social media accounts went silent. My brother stopped showing up at my regular places. But I knew this wasn't over. People who could plan a 6-month con against their own son don't just give up. They regroup. They plan. They wait. I used the respite to fortify my position. I changed jobs, moving to a company in a different industry where their connections couldn't reach. I legally changed my phone number and only gave it to trusted friends. I removed myself from all social media platforms, deciding digital privacy was worth more than online connectivity. Most importantly, I started therapy. The trauma of being betrayed by my entire immediate family, followed by months of harassment and stalking, had left deeper scars than I'd admitted. My therapist helped me understand that their behavior wasn't my fault, that setting boundaries wasn't cruel, and that protecting myself wasn't selfish. Through therapy, I began to understand the dynamics that led to this. My role as the family ATM hadn't developed overnight. It had been carefully cultivated through years of manipulation and guilt. The cruise scam wasn't an aberration. It was the logical culmination of a pattern they'd established over decades. But understanding didn't mean forgiving. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal. Some relationships become too toxic to salvage. Sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to play the game anymore. As I settled into my new life, I heard updates through Jake and other relatives. My family had formed their own narrative. I was a vindictive son who'd overreacted to a harmless prank. They'd conveniently forgotten the months of planning, the fake medical emergency, the mockery in their group chat. They painted themselves as victims of my cruelty, forced into poverty by my unreasonable demands. Some distant relatives bought their story. Others saw through it. I stopped caring about controlling the narrative. Those who knew me understood the truth. Those who didn't weren't worth convincing. The restraining orders would expire eventually. They might try to reestablish contact, might concoct new schemes. But I was ready now. I had legal documentation, security measures, and most importantly, the hard-won knowledge that family isn't defined by blood, but by behavior. My new life wasn't perfect. I still had trust issues that affected new relationships. I still checked my security cameras more often than necessary. I still felt a pang of loss when I saw other families enjoying normal relationships. But I was free from the cycle of exploitation and manipulation that had defined my adult life. The money I'd saved by not funding their latest emergency grew steadily. My house became a home filled with peace instead of drama. My career flourished without the constant distraction of manufactured crises. I built new friendships with people who valued me for more than my bank account. Most surprisingly, I found myself becoming someone I actually liked. Without the constant pressure to sacrifice my needs for others' wants, I discovered my own interests and priorities. I took up hobbies I'd never had time for. I traveled to places I'd always wanted to see, but couldn't afford after funding their emergencies. I learned that saying no wasn't selfish. It was necessary. The last indirect contact came through Jake, 6 months after the restraining orders were issued. My parents had been evicted from their rental house for non-payment. They were moving in with my sister, who was herself struggling to make rent. My brother had left town entirely, chasing construction work in another state. The family that had once planned elaborate schemes together was fracturing under the weight of their own choices. Jake asked if I felt guilty about their situation. I thought about it carefully before answering. Did I feel guilty? No. Did I feel sad? Perhaps. But not for them. For the family we could have been if they'd chosen differently. They'd had every opportunity to build honest relationships and legitimate success. Instead, they'd chosen manipulation and deceit. Their current struggles weren't my responsibility or my fault. They were the natural consequences of a lifetime of poor choices, finally catching up with them. I'd simply stopped shielding them from those consequences. As I sat in my peaceful home, reviewing security footage that showed nothing but suburban tranquility, I realized something important. The best revenge isn't destroying someone's life. It's building your own life so well that their absence improves it. Every day I woke up without dreading a manipulative phone call was a victory. Every month I saved money without funding someone else's poor decisions was progress. They thought they were so clever with their cruise scheme, their group chat mockery, their elaborate con. But in the end, their cleverness had cost them everything. Their son, their reputation, their financial stability, and eventually each other. Meanwhile, I'd gained something invaluable. Freedom from the toxic cycle that had trapped me for so long. The war wasn't over. It might never be truly over. But I'd won the battle that mattered most. The battle for my own life and future. And that victory was worth more than any amount of money they could have stolen. The restraining orders gave me breathing room. But I knew my family too well to believe they'd simply accept defeat. They'd spent their entire lives manipulating situations. This, to them, was just another obstacle. The first true test came 3 weeks later. I was grocery shopping when I noticed a woman following me through the aisles. Not subtle, constantly checking her phone, glancing my way. When I doubled back through produce, so did she. I abandoned my cart, left through a different exit, watching from my car as she frantically searched the parking lot. That evening, Jake called. My parents had hired a private investigator to track my movements and find my new address. The woman at the grocery store matched the description. They were burning through what little money they had left, trying to find ways around the restraining orders. I contacted my lawyer immediately. While hiring a PI wasn't technically violating the order, it was a clear attempt to circumvent it. My lawyer sent them a cease and desist letter. warning that any information gathered would be considered stalking. The PI dropped the case within days, apparently unwilling to risk her license for whatever my parents were paying. But they weren't done. My sister found a loophole. The restraining order didn't cover written communication through third parties. She started sending letters to my workplace, addressed to current resident, with my name in smaller text, hoping they'd be delivered without legal consequence. These letters were masterpieces of manipulation, alternating between tearful apologies and subtle threats about family secrets she might be forced to reveal. I documented every letter, scanning them before shredding them. My lawyer added them to our growing file, noting that while technically legal, they showed a pattern of continued harassment. He suggested we could extend the restraining orders, but I wanted to see how far they'd push. The answer came when my brother attempted his boldest move yet. He discovered the restraining order only covered direct contact with me. It didn't prevent him from visiting my workplace during business hours as a potential customer. He showed up at my new company, claiming to need our services, scheduling meetings with various departments. My boss, whom I'd briefed, was not amused. Security footage showed my brother taking photos of employee directories, noting car license plates, asking pointed questions about work schedules. When confronted by security, he produced documentation showing he was technically a legitimate client. It was clever but not clever enough. My company's legal department got involved, sending him a formal letter banning him from the premises for suspicious behavior unrelated to legitimate business purposes. They also shared the security footage with my lawyer, who filed for an expansion of the restraining order to explicitly include my workplace. The hearing for the expanded order revealed just how desperate they'd become. My brother showed up representing himself, arguing he had every right to explore business opportunities wherever he chose. The judge, reviewing months of documentation, disagreed. The restraining order was not only expanded, but extended for an additional 2 years. That's when things took an unexpected turn. My Aunt Catherine, who'd been following closely, called with shocking news. She'd been cleaning out her elderly mother's house and found something disturbing. Jewelry that had gone missing from various family members over the years, all hidden in a box labeled with my mother's maiden name. The pieces started falling into place. Those family gatherings where things would mysteriously disappear, always blamed on careless children or outside workers. The way Mom always seemed to have money for small luxuries despite their supposed poverty. The pattern of theft went back decades, long before I was even born. Catherine was furious. She'd lost her grandmother's pearl necklace at a Christmas gathering 5 years ago, devastating her because it was meant to be passed down to her daughter. Now, she found it hidden in her own mother's house, clearly placed there by my mother during one of her visits. Word spread through the extended family like wildfire. Other relatives started comparing notes, realizing that valuable items had gone missing whenever my parents visited. The cousin who'd lost his father's watch. The aunt whose antique silver disappeared. The uncle whose coin collection vanished during a family reunion. All of it traced back to my parents' presence. The family confrontation that followed was epic, though I only heard about it secondhand through Jake. 17 relatives descended on my parents' current residence, my sister's cramped apartment, demanding answers and the return of stolen property. Mom tried her usual tears and denials, but faced with Catherine's evidence and the collective memory of the family, her fabrications crumbled. The scope of their theft was staggering. Over 30 years, they'd systematically stolen from every branch of the family tree, selling items for cash while maintaining their facade of poverty. The very relatives they begged money from had already been robbed by them repeatedly. My sister, whose apartment was being searched by increasingly angry relatives, finally snapped. She revealed she'd known about the thefts for years, but kept quiet in exchange for a cut of the profits. Her online boutique had been partially stocked with items stolen from family members, which she'd sold to strangers across the country. The family gave them an ultimatum: return everything that could be returned, pay restitution for what had been sold, or face criminal charges. Catherine, still furious about her grandmother's necklace, was particularly adamant about involving the police. Watching from a distance, I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. This wasn't just about the crew's money anymore. It was about a lifetime of deception being exposed. The family that had mocked me for being gullible had been systematically victimizing everyone around them for decades. The pressure finally broke them. Dad, facing potential charges for theft spanning multiple decades, turned on Mom completely. He claimed she'd masterminded everything, that he'd just gone along to keep peace in the marriage. Mom retaliated by revealing Dad's gambling debts were 3 times larger than anyone knew, funded by the stolen goods. My brother, watching his parents' marriage implode while living in his sister's living room, made a desperate play. He reached out to me through a mutual acquaintance, offering to share information about our parents' crimes in exchange for me dropping the restraining order and lending him money to start over in another state. I declined through my lawyer, but his desperation gave me an idea. I contacted Catherine and suggested she might want to know about Dad's hidden gambling accounts, the ones I discovered during my research. She was very interested, especially when I explained how he'd been siphoning family money for years to fund his casino trips. The information spread through the family network within hours. Relatives who'd been sympathetic to Dad's claims of being Mom's unwilling accomplice suddenly saw him differently. The uncle who'd loaned him money for car repairs realized it had gone straight to the poker table. The cousin who'd helped with a medical emergency discovered it coincided with a major gambling loss. The family's financial forensics revealed the true extent of their deception. Between the thefts, the gambling, the fake emergencies, and the various scams, my parents had stolen close to $200,000 from the extended family over 3 decades. The cruise I'd funded was just the latest in a long line of cons. My sister, facing eviction for harboring criminals and unable to maintain rent without her parents' contribution, made one last attempt to salvage something. She created a GoFundMe, claiming she was an innocent victim of her parents' crimes, needing help to start over. She conveniently forgot to mention her own involvement in the thefts and her current legal troubles. I forwarded the link to Catherine, who was maintaining a family-wide communication network about the situation. Within hours, the fundraiser was flooded with comments from relatives exposing her role. She took it down within a day, having raised exactly $0. The extended family's response was swift and coordinated. They filed police reports in multiple jurisdictions, documenting decades of theft. They shared evidence across state lines, building a comprehensive case. They froze out anyone who tried to defend or assist my immediate family. My parents, now facing actual criminal charges rather than just family disapproval, made increasingly desperate moves. Mom tried to claim mental illness, saying she had a compulsion to steal. Dad insisted he was developing dementia and couldn't be held responsible. My siblings scrambled to distance themselves from their parents, while simultaneously begging relatives for money to hire lawyers. Jake kept me informed of each development, but I maintained my distance. The restraining orders were still in effect, and I had no intention of getting pulled back into their chaos. My life had finally achieved the peace I'd always wanted, and I wasn't going to sacrifice that for the satisfaction of watching their downfall in person. The criminal cases proceeded slowly, but inevitably. The evidence was overwhelming, documented across decades by the very family members they'd victimized. Plea deals were offered and rejected as each family member tried to shift blame to the others. My brother, facing his own charges for the unemployment fraud I'd exposed, fled the state entirely. He left behind angry creditors, a furious ex-girlfriend who discovered he'd stolen from her, too, and a warrant for his arrest. The last anyone heard, he was working under the table at a construction site 3 states away, constantly looking over his shoulder. My sister's business liquidation revealed even more victims. Customers who'd bought handmade items came forward, demanding refunds for what turned out to be mass-produced imports. Her supplier contracts showed she owed thousands to overseas manufacturers. The state attorney general's office opened a consumer fraud investigation. The family home, the one they claimed was at risk when they needed my money, turned out to have been sold years earlier. They'd been renting it back from the new owners while pretending they still owned it. Another lie in their web of deception. The real owners, learning about the criminal cases, began eviction proceedings immediately. Mom was convicted of multiple counts of theft and fraud, receiving 5 years probation and mandatory restitution. Dad got 3 years probation for his role, plus court-ordered gambling addiction treatment. My sister received 2 years probation for consumer fraud, and was banned from operating any business for 10 years. My brother remained a fugitive, with warrants in multiple states. The extended family's victory was bittersweet. They recovered some stolen items and got court-ordered restitution, but most of the money was gone forever. The emotional toll of discovering decades of betrayal by trusted family members left scars that would never fully heal. As for me, I marked the conclusion of the legal proceedings by doing something I'd wanted to do for years. I took a real vacation. Not a rushed weekend trip squeezed between family emergencies, but 2 full weeks in Europe, paid for with money I'd saved by not funding their latest crisis. Standing in a small cafe in Prague, reading Jake's message about the final sentencing, I felt the last weight lift from my shoulders. They'd stolen my money, attacked my life, and tried to destroy my future. But in the end, their own choices had been their downfall. I'd simply stopped enabling them and let reality take its course. The waiter asked if I wanted another coffee. I smiled, checked my bank balance, healthy and growing, and ordered another round. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly free. No fake emergencies, no guilt trips, no manipulation. Just me, my choices, and a future that belonged entirely to me. The best revenge really was living well, honestly, independently, and completely free from their toxic influence. They thought they were so clever planning their elaborate schemes, but they'd never understood the simplest truth. You can't build a life on lies and theft. Eventually, it all comes crashing down.